Hey everybody, Knick-Knack here, back again for another video. Now, as you see on the bomb down below, the topic of this video is games I finished in 2014. Now, I'm gonna be looking at my iPhone here because I've listed the games. And yeah, according to what says here, I've completed or beaten 14 games during that year. And while it might be an accomplishment to some people, to me, honestly, it's not really that impressive because I could have beaten much more if I hadn't watched a whole ton of anime and been addicted to Marvel Puzzle Quest, as well as a couple of free-to-play games on my iPhone. But anyway, in terms of these games, one thing I just want to say that about like a quarter of these games on this list are games I've started in 2013 and I've beaten in 2014. And yeah, so it's not really like 14 games if you think about it that way. But anyway, let me talk about those started in 2013, beaten in 2014 games. First game I want to talk about is Grand Theft Auto 5. This was my second favorite game of 2013, and I'm sticking to it because this game was pretty awesome in my opinion. I loved the world of Los Santos. The missions for most part were really exciting and fun to see. It had nice humor, and the gameplay was way more polished than any of the other Grand Theft Autos in my opinion. I'd recommend this game a whole lot. Next game I want to talk about is Project Cross Zone. Even though this game is tedious and repetitive and the second half of the game feels like a chore to play, I personally enjoy this game, however, because I'm a fan of crossovers. I really like the combat or gameplay of the tactical strategy of it. And if you play this game while listening to a podcast, it really helps. So those three factors alone made me enjoy this game as much as I would have been expected to. I, however, would not recommend this game due to its tedious, linear, and somewhat annoying nature. Next game I'm going to talk about is Mordecai and Rigby. Regular show Mordecai and Rigby in 8-Bit Land. Honestly, one of my most disappointing games I've played so far during this decade, because going into it I expected it to be like, hey Ice King, why'd you steal our garbage quality? But it wasn't. It was just some weak-ass, mediocre 2D platformer that just seemed slapped together. Sure, they make a whole bunch of references to regular show enemies or antagonists or main characters, but the gameplay mainly killed it because it was a bit sloppy at times, and on top of that, there were like no cutscenes or cinematics, which kind of like killed what the game was about, because they just get the two main characters, Mordecai and Rigby, get put into this world and they just go adventure it with no explanation at all. Because of this being a disappointment, I would not recommend getting this game. Next game I want to talk about is Saints Row 2. I really loved this game. I loved the customization, the mission structure, and the variety was very awesome. I liked the music, and the concept of taking it back to city from these three rival gangs was a nice sight to see or play. And yeah, if you play Saints Row and enjoy this, you know that I'm definitely gonna say that you should really try this out. It's a buy for me or a high recommendation. Next game is Eat Lead: The Return of Matt Hazard. This game was mediocre at best, because while it did have some great humor, like parodying Super Mario, Halo, and one of my favorite moments in this game was a boss that parodied Cloud Strife or JRPG characters in general. That boss was freaking awesome and funny to play against. This game for most part was just mediocre, as I'm saying again, due to the fact that it's just a corridor shooter. Once a third-person shooter, like once you're done with one room of enemies, you go to another one, shoot them, and to fight them. Then after that, you might be put into a little quick time event, and yeah, all it just says is a third-person shooter, and that's all it does for the most part. And on top of that, some of the controls were kinda like that. But despite those, it was a fun game at times. And for that, if you could find it for like $5 or less, I recommend checking it out. Alright, now those were the games that I started in 2013, ended in 2014. Now let's get into games that I started in 2014 and ended in 2014. First game I want to talk about is South Park: The Stick of Truth. I'm not really going to say much about this game because I talked about it in my best of 2014 list, but overall this was a really fun turn-based RPG with some amazing humor and really easy to get into battle system, and I just can't really say much more. Also, it's a very short RPG, and because of those, I recommend getting this game if you could like find it for $20 or less. So yeah, high recommendation for me. Next game I'm going to talk about is Postal 2: Share the Pain. Back then when I was a kid, I really enjoyed playing this game a ton, or the demo to be exact. So when I finally got into this game, I was kinda like, this game's just okay. I shouldn't have been expecting too much of it, because the game for most part got mediocre reviews. And yeah, that's what this game is. Mediocre or average at best. Because basically, the game is set up in, like, you play each day, like Sunday through Saturday, and you're given a task or a whole list of objectives on what you have to do. Such as, get some steak from a butcher, get this action figure, confess your sins at church, and pretty much like it gives you the choice of how you could do it, but those choices are kind of like bad, because all it just is either do this the right way or just like kill the people and then just steal it. And on top of that, you're suddenly put into like waves of enemies, and those kind of get a bit annoying. And yeah, for most part, it was just an okay game. As I said again, I wasn't expecting much due to its scores, but for what I paid, it was a decent game. Would I recommend it? Maybe. Yeah, I think I would. Just get a lower price of like $7 or less. Alright, next game I want to talk about is Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. Thanks to my iPhone and the power of emulation and apps, I was able to play Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, and for the most part, the game really aged well. I love the character of Soma. I just freaking adore the enemy designs and the bosses. The soul collecting feature of this game was really amazing and brought plenty of replayability. The maps were really nice to explore. And yeah, any Castlevania game like produced by Koji Igarashi, I think his name is bound to be awesome. And this game right here is no exception. I highly recommend Aria of Sorrow if you haven't played it yet. Speaking of Igarashi Castlevanias, another game I beaten is Castlevania Symphony of the Night. A very beautiful, fantastic game that has no more to be said, because anybody who's played Castlevania enjoys this game and loves it. From the music, to the exploration, to the gameplay, to how the combat is. Yeah, it does gameplay, but yeah, you understand. It's just the full package. And because of that, I can see why Symphony of the Night is quite possibly the best Castlevania game known to people. And yeah, even though I personally like Aria of Sorrow a bit more, if you look at this game objectively, this game is quite possibly the best of the Castlevania games, as I'm saying again. So of course, highly recommended. Let's see, what next? Next game I want to talk about is Saints Row the Third. Even though I enjoyed this game a ton, and I highly recommend it a lot, Saints Row the Third honestly has got to be one of the most overhyped games I've ever played. Because one, the giant purple dildos aren't really that amazing and hysterical as people make it out to be. Two, the missions, even though they put some of them back, they are just lumped in there without no explanation or cutscenes talking about why you're doing this or why you're doing that. Three, some of the customization is not as polished or great as Saints Row 2 is. Four, some of the story and moments is just what the fuck? That's why I've been and stuff like that. Five, I think they took out taxis. And yeah. But despite those, the gameplay was fun for the most part, because it's just standard Saints Row. And yeah, Saints Row for the most part was really fun and just a great, easy to get into game. Even though I harped on it for saying it's overhyped and whatnot, I would still recommend Saints Row the Third. Let's see. The next three games, I'm kinda not really sure if I consider them to be beaten because they're fighting games, but I'll just name them off and just give a few short sentences of what I thought of them. Super Smash Bros. 3S, awesome, and it deserves to be my third favorite game of the year of 2014. Still stays there, and yeah, even though I just beat certain modes, I'm just gonna talk about that or mention it because yeah. Same thing goes for Persona 4 Arena Ultimax and Dengeki Bunko Fine Climax. I just pretty much beat the arcade mode, not the story modes or something like that. But even though that I didn't complete the game like that, I'm just gonna talk about them and say that really enjoyable fighters. And speaking of Dengeki Bunko, fortunately, has been announced it's gonna release in the West for North America. So, Crack Lewis, fortunately for you, yeah, shout out to him. you don't need to like import this game if you're interested or not. You could just buy it once it hits America. So hooray! A game I never thought that would have been released in the US has a US release. So yeah, can't wait for that game, like rebuying it. And in terms of the import I got back there, I'm still keeping it. And the final game I want to talk about for the games I've beaten during this year is Child of Light. Just like some of the games I've mentioned on this list, I'm not going to say too much because I've already talked about it in my favorites games of 2014 list, but for most part, I had fun with this. The presentation, fucking beautiful. The gameplay, very easy to get into, and is a great turn-based RPG for newcomers. The story was very magical and somewhat, yeah, it was a nice magical game. And yeah, also a short, which I like short games considering I have a whole bunch of games that still need to get into. And yeah, Child of Light, I recommend that game. Oh yeah, on top of that, the other 3 Fires I recommend, or 3 Fires I talked about, I recommend those also. So yeah, those were all the games I've beaten in 2014 or completed or something like that. And that's all I have to say on this vid. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching. Take it easy, and until next video.